Hi there and welcome to another ACL update. I'm Alister and I'm one of the National Directors here at the Australian Christian Lobby, along with Wendy Francis, our National Director for Politics. Good evening to you, Wendy.
Hi, Alister. It's great to be with you.
Excellent. Wendy, we normally talk about Australian politics and things going on in the life of the ACL, but I think it's definitely important that we take a moment to look at the situation in the Ukraine. Obviously, Russia has invaded the Ukraine with help from Belarus, and it's just hard to sort of keep up with what's going on. I can say I've been on Twitter this last few days and seeing just the amount of disinformation. It's actually really hard to get a sense of what's actually going on, what people's motivations are, and so forth. But as Christians, I think it's really important that we, even in the far-flung reaches of Australia, have some sense of how we can respond. And Wendy, you've got a guest for us this evening to help us make a little bit of sense of that.
I have, and Bill Holm is a friend of ours for a very long time. And Bill and Laurel and their children were part of one of our churches that we pastored at. Bill has 4 children. It's my family, Tamsin, Evan, and also Carice. And we're just really grateful to have Bill with me today because Bill is Ukrainian. And not only is he Ukrainian, so he understands the Ukrainian people and what's going on over there, but he has gone back to Ukraine as an Australian Ukrainian to be a missionary there as well. So they're dear friends of ours, and I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much for your time, Bill. I really appreciate you joining us today.
I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to start with, where the ACL are concerned about political approaches to things like the Ukrainian situation. And so we were really pleased when the Prime Minister has made sure that he's been at the Ukrainian church yesterday or on Sunday. He made an announcement that he would do everything he could to help Ukrainian people. But I think still here in Australia, where I live in Queensland, we've had floods. We're still in the grip of COVID to some degree. We've had Afghanistan. People are almost in compassion overload. And so I don't want people to not be concerned about our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And I don't want them to lose sight of the fact that we have a moral obligation to help people where we can. And so I wondered, Bill, to start with, just like you are a human face of Ukraine to me and my husband, I wondered whether you'd actually be that to our supporters today and just explain to us your feelings when all of us know, I interrupted myself there, but all of us know that if you've been at a place and you see it on the TV, then you identify with it so much more. Most of our supporters would never have been to Ukraine, but you know this place intimately. And so I guess through your eyes, we'd like to think when you watch the news, when you see what's happening, what is it that happens to your heart? What are you seeing there?
Well, there's been a couple of nights where I haven't slept much because of just the effect of knowing the unprovoked attacks on Ukraine. That it's an invasion, and people are getting killed on both sides, but so it's just, I think most people weren't expecting it, because they've been, as someone has said, under a cloud for 8 years now. When Russia annexed Crimea and went into the eastern part and helped separatists or provoked separatists to rebel. So they've been in there for 8 years. So the Ukrainians have, kind of got used to having this sword over them, but they didn't expect that they'd actually be attacked.
So, Bill, what is there something that you would want our government to be doing, or is there something that you want your fellow Christians to know, or is there a way we can help? I know that you're in connection with people in Ukraine. Many people have not been able to do what they normally do. They've taken up different ways of helping. Is there there's two questions there, I guess. Is there something that the government should do? And for us as Christians, obviously we want people to pray, but is there something that we can do?
Yeah, well, it was really good to hear how strongly our Prime Minister came out. So that was really good. He came out clearly, strongly, so I was really happy to hear that. And that he's going to, send help, including, help with weaponry. I've got one friend over there in Ukraine who's a lecturer at a theological seminary. He's young, he's got 3 children, and I emailed him maybe Thursday and said, can I help? And he says, I'm leaving tomorrow, and there's been a general mobilisation, and so please pray for me and for the family that he's leaving behind. And he is in Odessa, or on the outskirts of Odessa, and that's been attacked now. So that was the one thing. He didn't ask anything other than prayer. And then the principal at a fairly large theological seminary in Lviv in western Ukraine, they've got maybe 600, 700 plus students. He came on with one video. He's very calm. He came on with one video, and you don't nearly hear him this, but he said twice, he said, please pray for chudo in Ukrainian, which is a miracle. Pray for a miracle. And then he later on said, pray for a miracle. And just recently, maybe yesterday, he came on again, and in what he was saying, he then said, pray for a big miracle. So that's a huge thing that we as Christians can do. The prayers from many, when the answer comes with help from the Lord, then there'll be much thanks to Him. For the Australian government, what they're doing, that the help that Scott Morrison has said we're going to help, that sounds really good. And he said going to fast forward the application for visas. That'd be great. And it would be great too if there are lots of refugees in the countries west of Ukraine. If there are lots of refugees there in Ukraine, in the other countries where they've escaped to, if we could take many refugees there that would want to come here.
I'm on the board of Samaritan's Purse, so I need to declare that perhaps conflict of interest, but I do know that Samaritan's Purse are setting up some projects at the borders of Moldova, of Romania and of Poland to help facilitate people who are flooding over into those 3 countries. So there are people over there able to help, but we do want to do everything that we possibly can to assist these people. It's just such a tragic situation. Bill, we hear a lot about their president, and I'm seeing things on Facebook. It seems that he's being very brave.
Yes.
Do you know anything about the president? Am I right in saying that he's being very brave?
Yeah, well, he won in a landslide. I think it was 73% voted for him. So it was a landslide because the previous president was initially very popular, but he won in a landslide. Mr. Putin has said, there are Nazis in, the government and there. Well, the president, Volodymyr Zelensky, he's Jewish, what he's been doing, he's been encouraging the people, and he's staying put, and I think he's been doing a fantastic job.
It does seem like that. It seems quite inspiring. Bill, you have always been inspiring to my husband and I, and I'm grateful to you for coming on today. I wonder, as we close just this segment, would you, in Ukrainian, give us a blessing? I know that people in Australia would just love to hear their mother tongue, but also it would be a blessing to each one of us. Would you do that for us?
Okay, well, I'll say it in English first. So the grace of the Lord Jesus be with you all, and with all those in Ukraine. So, Хай благодать Господа Ісуса буде з вами і теж із всіма вами у Україні. Amen.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. So, Alister, back to you. I think we've been grateful. I've put out a media release today. We're grateful to what the Prime Minister has said, but at the same time, we can't afford to then forget about our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. And so what we really need to see is an intake, a humanitarian intake over and above what we would normally do, because we can't just play with the deck chairs on the deck, so to speak, and move things around. We actually need, when a crisis comes like this, we need extra. And for the past 2 years, we've actually been quite a low intake, humanitarian intake, and that's been because of COVID. So there's a couple of things. There's a lot of spare spaces because we haven't been bringing people in, but there's also been a big budget saving of that. So in this budget that is going to come up in the end of March, it'll be just a few weeks away now, we really want to see specific budget items for the people of Afghanistan and also the people of Ukraine. We need to see that in the budget to really know that we'll be able to carry through on the promises that have been made.
Yeah. And Wendy, look, just for the sake of viewers and listeners, the Prime Minister, walking out of a Ukrainian church on Sunday, said this: I've instructed today the Minister for Immigration to accelerate the conclusion of Ukrainian visa applications to Australia. They will go to the top of the pile, and I've asked for those to be concluded urgently. There are some 430, roughly, applications from Ukrainian citizens to come to Australia across a range of different visa classes. And there's over 1,000 Ukrainians outside of Australia who have visas to enter Australia, and of course, they would be welcomed, he said. So we'll trust him to action that as quickly and effectively as
correct. Of
as
course, when we say
do.
that they go to the top of the pile, it means that the people from Afghanistan are somehow pushed down the pile. So we don't want there to be piles. We want there to be I guess we want to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. We want to be able to
say exactly the same thing.
We want to be able to help the people that we were already in the process of helping in Afghanistan. So we don't believe there needs to be just one pile. There is budget allowance because we haven't spent it over the last couple of years. There are less people being brought in over the last couple of years, way less. We've hardly had any immigration. So this humanitarian crisis like we are seeing in these countries need to be acted on urgently, and so we'll be looking for a budget allowance to do just that.
Yeah. Okay, well, watch this space. There's so much going on. It's happening so quickly. It's heartbreaking. I don't know what to say. And it's interesting commentary, people saying, younger people, I might add, in many instances, that, it's the first time in their life that a conflict of this sort of scale, I don't know if that's true, maybe Rwanda was that as well, but, something of this kind of magnitude with this sort of, that threatening word nuclear, which we haven't had for a long, long time. What does that mean? What does it actually mean? Anyway,
And it feels like
I don't know how much more the ACL will say on this, but
it feels like the globe is being bullied at the moment, to be honest. And I really think that the West needs to have a strong response to a bully.
Amen. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Let's get back to Australia. Now, Wendy, you've got someone to introduce to us this week who's just joined the team. It's really, really exciting when someone joins the team. So I'm going to throw it straight back to you to introduce our latest state director, Rob Norman. But I'll leave that to you, Wendy.
So when I moved into the federal role of politics for ACL, there was obviously a gap. And one of those gaps is in the political side of our operations here in Queensland. And you know how God just brings along the right person at the right time? Well, Rob Norman and his wife Deb have been those people for quite a while now, because they have been in Adelaide in South Australia, but very engaged with ACL. So if there was a need for, he's a pastor, Rob's a pastor, so if there was a need for a venue, Rob was the go-to person. If there was need for some to get people motivated, Rob was one of our go-to people. And so when we found out that Rob and his wife Deb were moving to Queensland, and that coincided with me moving into the political side of federal politics, we just contacted him and said, would this be an interest to you? And we're really grateful to you, Rob, because you and your wife Deb have taken on this role. You and Deb being in a supportive role, I always know that it's never just one person who's in ministry. So thank you, Rob. I'd love you just to introduce yourself to our supporters. You are involved in Queensland because you're here, but you also are looking after New South Wales and the ACT, I think, too. So you tell us that, but I'd love you just to introduce yourself briefly. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be with ACL. Deb and I have obviously had a pretty good look at ACL from the outside. In the last 2 weeks, we've been able to do that more so from the inside, which has been very encouraging. It's great to see a team of people who are real on the inside and the outside. And so, yeah, we're just very happy to be on board. So we've spent 27 years planting, pastoring and growing a church, including all the infrastructure and people, things that go with that. And we really felt that the Lord had led us into a different thing. And at this stage of our lives, a connection and more involvement with ACL seems like the logical thing. Not only that, we feel called to it. We feel that the Lord has called us into this role. And I think you learn a lot as a pastor. You probably learn all the traits of people and how to deal with different people. So along the lines, we've developed some great relationships with some politicians. We've kind of learnt the interface between church and government. Not always an easy one, but it's one that I'd really encourage pastors around the place to not hold back from. I think there are many rewards for doing that. And certainly the church we've pastored has encouraged us in that. We've also been encouraged by other churches, and we've seen a number of pastors, particularly in South Australia, in the last 6 months particularly, engage in that realm. So that's been very encouraging, and I think it was part of the reason it was so easy for us to step into this role at ACL.
Thanks, Rob. You've also been quite involved in media from time to time, being a bit of a media spokesman, so we're looking forward to that side of things too. But you've certainly hit the ground running because there's a lot going on, and I think Alister wants to not give you any rest and ask you a few political questions now that we know a little bit about you, but we're not giving you much rest.
Hitting the ground running is a challenge when you're in a metre of
Correct.
water.
True, we've welcomed him with a lot of water.
You've got to do it with jet skis on.
Yeah.
Yes. So for those of you who are not in Queensland or northern and mid New South Wales, there's a lot of water up there right now. So there's another prayer point along the way. Rob, there's a couple of issues that you've kind of just dived straight into. In the past, we've been speaking to Nikki Aben, and I'm sure we'll continue to speak to her from time to time with respect to field operations and all those sort of things. But in terms of the politics of the matter, we're still in New South Wales looking at the assisted suicide bill. They have not announced the outcome of the vote in the upper house yet. Can you just bring us up to speed, Rob, on how that is looking at the moment?
I actually haven't had too much to do with that just yet, but I'm in the process of connecting with that bill. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for us to affect at this stage. There's a lot of background that's happened, and so the more we can have supporters.
I could probably jump in there and say a little bit too. Sorry, I talked across you, Rob. I didn't mean to do that, but I could probably, because I've been, because we had the euthanasia bill up here in Queensland too, I sort of had a little bit to do with it with Nikki, and we had a really strong response to the petition, which was amazing, because we had a petition going and the pro-euthanasia people, pro-death people had a petition going, and as far as I know, we're still ahead. So that was going neck and neck, but that's quite amazing because, as Rob says, this is a difficult topic. It's not a topic that that even Christians are really across. But we know that at least 4 members of the upper house in New South Wales have committed themselves to opposing the bill. So we are not feeling like this is a lost cause. We're really asking people to pray. Still take the opportunity to talk to your members in New South Wales, but really pray, because we feel as if we can still win this.
Well, Wendy, there's talk of a deadlock between committee members, so that is a really good point to pray for.
Yeah.
It is, and in other states we haven't seen that so much. So what we're seeing, and I think the Premier there has been strong in his stand as well. He doesn't agree with euthanasia, so that's really helpful. But, I think more and more people need to understand what euthanasia is and what it isn't. I still have people say to me, I don't want to be kept alive on a life support system. Turning off a life support system is not euthanasia. Euthanasia is the purposeful act of killing somebody. I think we've got a long way towards actually an understanding of what euthanasia is, what palliative care is, the lack of palliative care that's available. All of those things go hand in hand. And I think in New South Wales, because we've been fighting this battle on many other fronts, we're perhaps a little bit more wise and more ready to actually give some good detail and some good information, and perhaps that's working in our favour.
Yeah, a big part of that is education of people.
All right, so look, it's not too late.
A big part of that is educating ourselves and others around us as well. And often in areas like euthanasia and some of the life-related issues, it feels sometimes like victory looks a lot like defeat, because we actually have incremental wins and often they're not obvious. And so it's important we chip away at this bill. It's important we keep engaging with our political friends, and we mustn't give up on it, obviously.
No, that's right. And not too late to fill out the ePetition if you haven't done so already and you're in New South Wales. Rob, it's probably a bit rude of me to throw you in the deep end like that. You've actually probably only been with us for single-digit days.
We're looking at a couple of weeks almost.
All right, so my apologies. I should be kinder than that. Mark Latham's parental rights bill as well in New South Wales. Obviously, it's seeking to ban schools from teaching gender fluidity to children. Really important stuff, but it's really about parental rights. It's really about standing up for a parent's responsibility over their children, and nothing, particularly not the state, in an inappropriate way interfering. How is that proceeding? And Rob, that might be still one that you're catching up with as well.
Yep. No, I've been looking at that one a little as well. So we have a few weeks before that one is before Mark Latham actually speaks on that one again. But in the lead up to it, again, this is an issue where we have to see parents regain control of the input that goes into their children's education, and that's at the heart of this thing. And so we don't want to go down the road of another Victorian situation where parents are powerless almost, and even commentators are powerless to speak into those issues. And looking at the bill, it looks like Mark Latham has addressed those issues well. And again, there's quite a bit we can do to support him in getting that thing through. Now, again, whether we get a victory on this or not, we don't really know, but we've just got to keep persevering. And so Mark Latham has articulated the issues very well.
And I think some of our supporters will be surprised that, Mark Latham is an unlikely hero for us, but he really has been a hero on a number of different causes and issues in New South Wales. And so we are looking to launch a campaign, Alister, for people to actually support Mark's bill in that way, and that'll be coming within the next week or so.
And what we've seen happen negatively in some contexts also can happen positively, which is that when some sort of legislation goes through the first state, it makes it much easier for it to happen again in a subsequent state. It's not always true, but we've unfortunately seen that with abortion to birth bills, with euthanasia, where gender conversion is another one. But let's really get behind this, folks. Let's really support New South Wales. For those of you that are in New South Wales, really get behind Mark Latham's bill. It's a private member's bill, so it's subject to the dynamics that are at play there. But honestly, this is an important one.
Private members' bills can really be important, because that's obviously where we are with Claire Chandler's protect women's sport bill. That's a private member's bill as well. And usually you don't necessarily get the government supporting private members' bills, but the Prime Minister has supported that one. So private members' bills are important and play a really important role in democracy. So we're really hoping that Mark Latham's bill gets a fair hearing.
Yeah, excellent. Rob, Norman, welcome to the ACL. It's great to have you. Really looking forward to spending more time chatting with you. But in the meantime, go deal with the floodwaters, settle in, take your time. It's been a big week just as far as the weather is concerned.
Excellent. No, it's great to be with you guys.
Thanks for joining us, Rob.
Alrighty. Wendy, I just want to spend last couple of minutes talking about the South Australian election coming up in March. I guess at the moment it's all about forums and getting to know the candidates. Are you going to end up down in South Australia at some point?
Well, we've got our little dynamo, well, I don't say little, but we've got our dynamo, Christopher Bro, here in South Australia, and he and Amanda Bro and their kids, they're amazing. So I may end up there to run some of the forums, but at the moment we're just working on when they will be and who will be invited. We're also looking at doing some direct mailing into households in particular electorates, because this election really is one of the really important pro-life elections. It's all about life, because people from both sides of politics voted for abortion to birth. And so some of them are in very marginal seats, and that's who we're targeting. We want to actually really remove people who are against life, and we want to see people elected that will support the values of life. And so this is a life election. It's really important. We are doing forums, but we're also doing letterbox dropping, and we are doing some direct mail outs. They cost a bit, those direct mail outs, but we've seen how effective they are, and we want to make sure that people are informed, well informed.
Yes, and look, as always, we don't tell you who to vote for. We don't tell you who not to vote for. But if you go to savotes.org.au, that'll be in the show notes as a link. But if you go there, we do list the various different politicians that have been in office to show you how they've voted on life issues. And yes, we are setting the agenda to the degree that the ACL can do that in an election. We're pushing really hard and making this about life, and we're really making it really, really clear how folks have voted. And please, vote your values.
Yeah. It's not about parties. This is the thing. It's not about parties, particularly in this South Australian election. It's about your values. So I encourage people to contact every single candidate that is running in their seat in South Australia and work out what your 4 or 5 top priorities are, and ask each of your candidates that.
Yes.
Because don't just go along with voting how you've always voted in the past. Really find out what your candidate actually stands for, what they stand for and what they stand against.
And we'll be saying this in the federal election as well. And it is new for some people. It's new. For a lot of folk, it's been, look at the logo of the party, don't even know the name of the candidate, doesn't matter. It's the party, just vote. What we're saying now is go past the party, go and find out who these people are, what they think, what their values are, what their voting record is if they've been in office already, and make your decision to stand for your Christian values, for your life values, on the basis of who you see on the ticket. And we've been really surprised, I think, Wendy, to find allies in different places in politics than we would normally expect. And Christopher Bro here, our state director, has been doing tremendous work building relationships with just good, solid people. And we want you to know they're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. Moving on from South Australia, efforts to decriminalise drugs. Now, we knew that was happening in Victoria with Fiona Patten. It's also happening in the ACT. So we're going the full gamut. Heroin, ice, crack if you can get it. It's all up for grabs.
It's absolutely horrendous. And, any parent or any medical practitioner would just be shaking their head in disbelief at this. So, if we think that there's something that's really bad and we can't control it, well, we don't just take down the road signs. You imagine, people are breaking the speed limit on a highway, and so what? because they're breaking the speed limit, we take down the road signs? No, we don't. We actually police it and we keep people safe. We're always talking at the moment, COVID, everything, the floods. We want to keep people safe. And then ACT and Victoria say, we're going to decriminalise drugs. Like, I'm sorry, but it leaves me speechless.
Now, they're doing that on the basis, or the argument is made, that it is a health issue and not a criminal issue. And I think folks just really have to try and wrap their heads around that. It's kind of counterintuitive. I'm no expert on it, Wendy, but any thoughts on their rationale?
Well, I think we've got to look at the logic of this, because when we're looking, and I know I'm introducing something different here, but when you're looking at the conversion therapy law in Victoria, for instance, they've made that a criminal issue. So anybody around Australia who is affecting someone in Victoria as far as their gender can be criminally prosecuted. So what the ACT and Victoria are saying about drugs is that they will remove that. So if somebody from Queensland, for instance, is supplying drugs into Victoria without it being a criminal offence, with it being a health offence, then I'd be really questioning, okay, where's the law in that? How does that affect drugs coming in from interstate, for instance? Because each of us have a state health law, health regulations. If they're moving it into health instead of criminal law, then that actually removes it out of a federal sense. So there's a lot of questions that I would have about that. But we know that people under the influence of ice, particularly, and heroin, but ice is so prevalent at the moment. They become almost superhuman at times in their rage and their violence, and they are causing criminal damage and harm to people. So we will be opposing this move with all we have, and we would encourage all of our supporters. We don't have a lot of supporters in the ACT. It's a fairly small place. So we need everybody getting engaged in this one.
Yeah. All right. So that's for you, Victorians. That's for you in the ACT. We'll be running campaigns. If you're really, really raring to go, you can always write to your local member. You can always express your concerns as vociferously as you desire, and they'll be pleased to hear from you. Wendy, I think we're pretty much coming up to the end of another week. On this issue, I'd love to talk to some experts. We'll see what we can line up in the weeks to come. And you can look forward next week. We're hoping to line up a senator to talk about something very topical. I'll leave it at that for the moment in case it falls through, but I hope it doesn't. But we've got another big week coming up. In the meantime, we continue to pray for Queensland and New South Wales for the waters to subside. We continue to pray for the Ukraine and all these other things going on as well. Wendy, thanks for another week.
Always good to talk, Alister. I feel like we could talk for another half an hour easily, but I'm grateful to people who are watching and becoming engaged politically just through some of the snippets that we're able to give.
Yeah. Well, that's it, folks, for another ACL update. We look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, good evening.